To flip or not to flip? Yeah, that's a question. Whether 'tis nobler to suffer the slings and arrows of Eric's videos, or, well, if you're watching this, you're already suffering the slings and arrows of my videos, so let's move on to the real questions. Maybe you've gotten tired of just being a lecturer. Maybe you're thinking, is there another way? I've heard of this flat classroom model. Do I want to do it? Well, there's some questions you're going to want to answer first. Is this going to make your experience as a teacher easier? Is this going to make your experience as a teacher more pleasurable, more exciting? Well, let's endeavor to think about what's the pros and the cons from your point of view as the instructor of the flipped classroom model. So what do we gain by going to the flipped classroom model? The biggest thing we gain is our in-class time. You've looked at the previous material, you know what the flipped classroom model is, you've taken your content outside of the classroom, and you have time in class to do different activities rather than deliver content. You can see we're moving from a classroom to a party. All right, the in-class time isn't really a party, but it is now your time to interact with students as they are doing, not just listening, but doing things. If you are not interested in having a very different experience in class, if you are not interested in having more activities for the students in class, then the flipped classroom model is not for you. Another thing you gain is better questions from the students. When you're giving a lecture and students ask you a question, they haven't had much time to process the material that you're given. So most students do not have very good questions, merely asking you to restate something you've said before perhaps, but they don't get to questions that delve deeper into the material. By having delivered the material ahead of time and having given the students things to work on ahead of time, they now have processed the information, and when they ask you a question, it is usually deeper and a better question. Another thing you gain is more group work. Rather than each person individually sitting there listening to you or doing work on their own, you have the possibility of putting them into groups. This is very important in today's world. In real life, learning happens in groups. In real life, projects are done in groups. Group work is a great life skill, and it's a great teaching technique. There can be a lot of peer instruction. And, of course, there's consistent delivery. I don't know about you, but I teach multiple sections of the same class. And sometimes I think, did I say that in this section, or did I say that in a different section? Or if I said it in one but not the other, but then I put it on a quiz, then the one that never heard it feels that it's unfair, so on and so forth. By putting the material online ahead of time, I know that they're getting consistent delivery because they're all watching the same videos, reading the same PowerPoints, doing the same activities before class. But not everything about the flipped classroom model is good. Let's talk about a few of the downsides, again, from your point of view as the instructor. The work is front-loaded, and what I mean by that is this. Right now, you already do lesson planning for every class, but now you're going to have to do a lot of work before classes even begin because you have to prepare your material. Either you're making your own videos, or you're finding different internet videos perhaps, or you're finding other resources for students and you're going to have to put them all into Blackboard, or however you're going to deliver it to them. You have to get all of that done ahead of time. So there's a lot more work before the class even begins. Well, you're thinking that's okay, Eric, because once the class begins, there's less work. I wish I could tell you that were true, but it isn't. There's still plenty of work for you to do while classes are in session, even when you're physically in class. You might talk less in class, but you're going to work a lot. You're going to walk around. You're going to interact with students. And you have to prepare that material for the in-class projects as well. So it's tough to say that there's much of a savings in time during the class either. And perhaps biggest, the students don't love it. Research states that any active learning technique meets student resistance, and in my experience, that is true. Students complain that they are teaching themselves. We're going to get that into that a little bit more a bit later. So I guess then you're asking, well, why should I do it, Eric? And the answer, I guess for me, is this. I started because research said this was a better way for students to learn the material, this was a better way for students to retain the material, and I have found in my experience that that is true. But we're going to get into a little bit more of the student point of view in the next video. I hope that will answer a lot of your questions then.